Right. So first, I want to thank Professors Sensenig and the NDU for their support in organizing the debate. Thank you very much. I will give a brief intro on our organization. So the Lebanese Transparency Association, LTA, is the national chapter of Transparency International. Its mission is to promote transparency and integrity, as well as prevent and fight corruption through collaboration, advocacy, and active engagement in public, private, and non-governmental organizations. Now, as part of the UNDP Lebanese Electoral Assistance Project, known as LEAP, LTA's goal is to achieve transparency in the electoral process in Lebanon. We have thus decided as LTA to organize 2 online debates on topics related to transparency in elections. So we'll have 2 topics. The first topic is the use of social media an opportunity to ensure transparency and accountability in the elections, or it is to promote hate speech in the Lebanese context. And the second topic will be, does the aid provided by civil society organizations supports the needs of the citizens, or it's just a form of clientelism? The debates will consist of 2 teams of 2 who will be discussing topics from opposing sides. On the positive team for both debates, we have Angie and Christelle, and on the negative team, we have Abed and Pierlina. Now, each team will deliver 2 constructive speeches and 2 rebuttal speeches. Each speech will be delivered from one of the team members. The affirmative team will give the first constructive speech, and the opposition gives the second constructive speech. Each constructive speech is followed by a rebuttal by the other team. And at the end of the debate, the first speakers of each team will deliver the concluding speech. Now, the total duration of each debate will be of 30 minutes, including a small 5 minutes recess to prepare for the concluding speeches. Professor Sensenig and myself will be on the judging panel. I'm going to read the rules for you. So first, no revision of position of a team is permitted during the debate. No judges must be, the judges must base their decision entirely on the material presented without regard for other material which may happen to possess. Any gains made outside of the established procedure are disallowed. There cannot be any interruptions, of course, and speakers must wait their turns. Now, while you're speaking, I'll be informing you when there is 1 minute remaining for your speech. Okay, so we'll start with the first debate that is around social media. I'll be writing for you the time left. When there is 1 minute left, I'll write you on the chat box. Is it okay with you?
Sure.
All right. So team affirmative, it's Angie and Christelle. You will be starting. You tell me when you're ready so I can start the timer.
Okay. We have 2 or 3 minutes for the introductory speech.
Yeah, you have 3 minutes, and then the rebuttal will be of 2 minutes from the other team.
Okay, thank you.
Should I start?
All right, Angie, are we ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Yeah, let's go.
Go.
So, timer started?
Yep.
When we talk about whether social media really helps when it comes to transparency and accountability, or whether it just spreads hate speech, we should first start by talking about what social media is up against. So here we are talking about social media versus traditional mainstream media. And it is quite clear that social media is cheaper and more accessible, which makes it more effective in the sense that it is less costly and more accessible. And in reality, the cost per 1,000 impressions when it comes to TV is about $28, while the cost per 1,000 impressions when it comes to social media is less than $3. So we could be reaching a much bigger platform through social media and then through mainstream media. And additionally to that, it is very accessible. And in the context of Lebanon, the number of social media users in Lebanon is equivalent to 64.3% of the population, according to January 2021 data. So once again, I resume that it's both cost-friendly and very accessible. It democratizes the spread of information.
This democracy automatically translates to increased transparency and accountability, because we all know here that there are certain conditions to live in a country where, when we're talking about anti-corruption, we're talking about topics of accountability. You have to have information about what's going wrong, and you have to have, even more than that, access to the discussions on the topic. And this is precisely, I guess, Transparency International in its very name is a testimony to how important the idea of transparency is. And ever since the days of ancient Greece, you know, you had the agoras with open doors. So when we're talking about accessibility and cost, these are not details. These are make or break matters when it comes to fair elections, when it comes to accessibility, because there are conditions to accountability and to transparency. And the first one is accessibility. So this is why Christelle's point is very relevant today. And when we look at the current election laws, we see that it's in even bigger concern. The maximum amount that you can spend in your election campaign is immense. So social media is more necessary than ever. And when we're talking about accessibility, we're also talking about the diaspora. How do you expect the diaspora, who are a total of almost 225,000 people who are registered to vote for these elections, how do we expect them to be active parts of these elections and creating their own opinions and being able to participate in a transparent way and demanding accountability without access to the most basic information possible out there? Christelle.
Once again, Angie's point it's very relevant. And once again, when we talk about accountability, transparency, all of that is also has participation as a prerequisite. And this is why it's important when we talk about diaspora, for example. But also when we talk about... All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. So Abed and Pirna, time to refute what has been said. You'll have 2 minutes for that. Okay. I started the timer.
Okay, so the team said that the social media is cheaper and accessible to everyone. Thus, what if it fall in the hand with the wrong people? However, according to my small research, I found that there's a lot of social media platform lack of privacy, and it has a weak cybersecurity. So it's threatened by many hackers and many dark-handed sites to influence the people's opinion. However, the media platforms are companies owned by one or like a group of people that aim for money and more money. Thus, what if a certain politician or a candidate in the election is a shareholder in this company? Would he or she allow a post that is against her interest, his or her interest? And how could we, how does it help in being transparent and credible enough in elections, especially in a mixed and highly intersectional election in, like we could say, a fertile field in a state such as Lebanon, with a lot of diversity, a lot of international and internal diversity, and a lot of international finance that could also affect the elections in Lebanon and affect the results. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Abed. It's time for you to present your first argument.
Yes, sure. First of all, I'd like to define what is an online hate speech. Online hate speech is a speech made online, which purpose is attacking a person or a group that based on their religion, a race, or gender. However, in Lebanon, it's mainly based on sectarianism and confessionalism, since the Lebanon system is based on the confession and the sectarian groups. However, the hate speech also reflects the beliefs of a group in a distaste for the other one or a certain political beliefs. it's a product of a lack of knowledge and experience. And however, the most important point is the lack of exposure to the other group. It's the main problem in the Lebanese context. However, as social media is similar to TV platforms that is owned by many political leaders and financed by political parties or certain politicians whom tend to direct the public opinion to vote for them, or at least to, for example, to show the other groups and other parties as a monster. They are coming to attack us, they are coming to take your rights, limit your freedom, which is the morphine used mainly by the Sulta for the people and the general public. However, they spread through the media, especially on social media. They spread the fake news, the hate speeches, especially, and it's highly active in the elections by recruiting also the electric flies in Arabic, we say it, to like misguide the public opinion and to gain more votes on the expense of the truth and what is really on the ground. However, Lebanon is the hate speech that mainly promoted is for the leaders and the party leaders and the politicians who aimed and says that they fought for Lebanon, they fought for Lebanese and fought for one state and one country. But what do they mean by the Lebanese? In my opinion, the Lebanese, they meant were the people from their same religion and same sex. However, the opponent was the other sex and the other one. And if they were really and say the truth that they fought for one nation, one Lebanon, I'd like to conclude my speech by saying, why don't we have a unified history book? Thank you.
Thank you, Abid. Christelle and Angie, time to try to refute what has been said. You'll have 2 minutes for that.
All right, I will go for it. I think Angie will touch on the relationship with the last thing that Abid talked about, which is the lack of an access to one unified history book. But I want to go from one thing that Abid stated, and it's the fact that some people in power might be able to own these means of media and thus control the content. However, and when we talk about social media being cheaper, this is exactly why this makes social media more advantageous. Because right now you can ask any person in Lebanon, like list any TV channel, and you will hear them almost instinctively tell you the political party that they are related to or the sect that they are related to. And this is because when such a platform is so expensive, you need to maintain it. And when you need to maintain it, you need money from somewhere. And whoever pays the piper calls the tune, which is why mainstream media can be more risky when it comes to controlling the information than social media, which is cheaper and needs less dependency on funders. Most of them rely mainly on donations, for example, Megaphone News, to state one of many. So for that part, this is mainly the argument. If we want to talk about hate speech,
if there's an issue with the conflict of interest, I think that, opposing teams missing out on a very important point, which is, if Elon Musk today bought Twitter, I think that has much less of an effect on whether the changing table of who has any shares in Twitter or other such social media, which I would love for the opposing team to show us exactly which politicians have how many shares in which social media account, as opposed to which politicians have how many shares in traditional media platforms and have undoubtedly and repeatedly for the entirety of our history impacted the way that people think, to the certain degree that we actually agree that there is actually no unified history book for the Lebanese people. And one of the reasons, because people don't really ask for it that much. There hasn't been a common space on the media so far for people to ask for it that much.
Your time is up. Thank you. Now it's the chance for you to present your second argument.
One starking comment in the topic that the opposing team is touching on, but just not quite right, is the idea of hate speech, which, let's acknowledge, is by definition an incitement of violence or any threat towards violence. I think that it's very simplistic to reduce something that is a democratic structure to just a certain exception because you're afraid of somebody understanding you wrong or you're afraid of defamation or whatever that was. I mean, if that's the case, then the opposing team is simply saying, let's not have free speech, because some people's feelings might get hurt, or because, you know what, some people might actually be risking their lives for what they're trying to do. When we're talking about hate speech, we're trying to derail the conversation in certain ways, especially noting that there are laws that could tackle hate speech very simply. But there aren't enough laws to promote engagement on social media, so it can go both ways. When we're talking about, if they want to talk about alternatives, if they want to talk about the fact of between conflict of interests and between, you know what, there could be issues on social media with how people are meant to believe and how they're directed to believe, then the same can be said, just as we have repeated various times about traditional media, but even more so on the topic that why are we even having this discussion if there are going to be concerns about who's influencing who in such a narrow sense? So all we're proposing as a team, and our final note is that there's nothing perfect. There's nothing perfect, and there are certain ways that we are trying to function as a democracy, and it's about choosing which formula works best. And social media does work best.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, you still have 1 minute if you want to continue.
I wanted to build on what Angie said when it comes to countering the whole discussion and shifting, like instead of actually solving the issue, trying to stigmatize it. Let's not talk about it to try not to hurt anybody's feelings. No, there are very obvious ways to not hurt anybody's feelings or put them in danger. And as Angie said, it's about laws. And moreover, I want to talk about human rights. While there are human rights in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which protect our dignity and protect us against discrimination, there are also human rights that protect our freedom of speech. And we can't really compromise one for the other. We have to find the perfect formula. And we've seen, like, for example, Twitter monitoring the content, for example, when it came to the US presidential elections. So there are solutions which don't require us to keep quiet or to think that social media is bad inherently.
Okay, thank you. Habib and Prerna, what's your answer for that?
Well, I'll give the floor for my colleague Prerna.
Where in our opinion, we see that, okay, you're mentioning laws and everything, but we live in a democratic world. So the backfire that the social media would get is, for you, like the emotion of the people don't actually matter anymore. Like, okay, you open the floor to everyone. You say that everyone has the right to say anything, but at the end of the day, people are actually behind that screen are struggling to maintain a complex, a straight mind, let alone you're gonna tell them that everything is okay, everything that you say would be respected, and I put the respect part into quotation. Yet we know, especially if we're gonna say in Lebanon, that whatever we say, it will automatically backfire on us, and this will create a whole debate that would never end, and that would cause even more further problem than this, only that small problem that was actually put on this platform. So, and also you mentioned human rights, but we are forgetting that one of those rights is also to respect that human, whatever that human is, and saying a hurtful, also again into quotation, hurtful words can also cause this person to question where these rights will end or where these rights will start even. So for us, we can say that yes, social media is a wide platform, is the most used platform, but also it is the most disadvantaged platform, as people are open to say anything to anyone without even considering what this person or these people are coming from or what their backgrounds are from. So hate speech, social media is promoting hate speech because we are open, and this openness is causing a lot of cruelty in our world.
Yes, I'd like to add just in the few remaining seconds.
But sorry, yeah, the time is up for the rebuttal. But now you have the chance to present further more arguments to defend your position. Prerna and Abid, go ahead.
Yes, Prerna.
furthermore, as I was previously mentioning, that you mentioned that the Elon Musk bought Twitter, but we know that a lot of platforms on that app was closed and was blocked because of him. So if you're saying that that this person who is basically, as we can say, born in our generation or born in our century, is actually refusing or is actually not welcoming everyone into that platform, can't we say that any person that comes from places that actually we don't know how they think would actually not or will actually accept people or will actually block them because he or she is not accepting and it's causing hate speech to others, even though both sides are simply expressing what they think. However, however, in a certain instant, that expression or these opinions can lead to many hate speech and can lead, especially in a diverse culture that such as ours, hate speech can lead to, as I previously said, many other problems. So,
thank you. Christelle and Angie, it's your chance to refute what has been said.
Okay.
You have 2 minutes.
Angie, go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. First off, I want to agree with the opposing team. You have it right that we do live in a democratic world. So my question is the solution to shut down social media when there are people who are trying to attack free speech or trying to derail the conversation into hate? Or is the solution to create legal frameworks to fight those bots or those people who are trying to incite violence, which I reiterate is a minority? And there are definitely efforts globally. It's a global movement to try to fight bots. Nobody in the world is saying, you know what, let's shut down social media just because there are some people who are trying to derail the conversation. Let's instead try to create protection systems and regulation for social media. The second point is that whatever you say on TV can backfire on you too. It's not just on social media. And I just want to get you to recall for a second here, if you remember the Hisham Haddad show, where he literally stood at every person's word just to make fun of them, whether it was political or not. So trust me, you can get backfired wherever you were. And my very last point is that, yes, people can say anything to anyone, and that is exactly the beauty of it. Because first off, you do have the option to begin with, whereas before you didn't even have the option to do that. And second off, because don't worry, if there's actually any actual harm on you, there are legal frameworks to protect you. But if you're just sensitive and you don't want to listen to criticism, then why are you even demanding accountability? Why are you even asking for democracy if you don't want a platform to actually ask questions and perform your accountability? Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. And you have more time, or is it done?
Yeah, you still have 20 seconds.
All right. One last thing. Yarina talked a lot about how the risk of this hate speech escalating into a bigger conflict and situation. And Abid talked just a few seconds earlier about the lack of having one unified history book. And this is exactly the reason. It's because we decide to stop the conversation instead, because we are so fearful of reactions instead of actually agreeing on one thing.
Thank you, Christelle. Thank you all for the speeches. Now we're going to go for a small recess. You think 5 minutes is too much, or you want maybe to have it like 3 minutes? You think it's enough for maybe 3 minutes to revise everything and present like your conclusions?
Yeah, sure.
3 or 5 minutes?
I don't mind 3 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to assign you to breakout rooms. Just 1 second.
Yes.
All right. So we'll start with the negative team. So it's Abid and Trina will have the chance to do the conclusion and try to convince us about their stance.
Okay. As a conclusion,
you'll have two and a half minutes.
Okay. As a conclusion, social media is a double-edged sword. It promotes democracy and at the same time it promotes hate speech depending on its user. But the main focus of this debate is the Lebanese election and the Lebanese context. Thus, it promotes in the Lebanese society and the Lebanese real life, now away from imagination, it promotes hate speech. And the floor is Irina's, all yours.
And with the absence of proper regulation, one can say that in a country such as Lebanon, a small word after a very long period of time can ignite a flame that cannot be stopped. And as the opposing team just said, legal framework, however, does freedom of speech has something called a legal framework, or now we are changing the whole definition of democracy and the freedom of speech? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Angie and Christelle, it's your turn.
Okay, I would first like to say that social media is a double-edged sword. Traditional media is a weighted double-edged sword for the favor of one side. Just to recap just a second about the points that we made that we feel that have not been heard enough. Social media is less expensive and it's more accessible, and it's all the more reason to encourage people who are more independent, who have the guts to stand up when accountability needs to be at play. As such, we think we have made our point in that its accessibility is a prerequisite for having transparency and accountability in such a crucial time as the elections. Lastly, the possibility of hate speech is no reason to shut down the involvement on social media. And it's important to know that not all discussion leads to hateful discussion. And it's also important to know that words can be said anywhere. It is not only on social media that people are waiting on each other's throats to be able to fight back. It's about which platform is more accessible for you to defend yourself. My last point before I give the floor back to Christelle is that the real danger in traditional media is exactly the conflict of interest, which for some reason the opposing team seems to see a more prominent or looming danger in social media. Christelle?
I'd like to add, and specifically when it comes to the other team, we talked about two main points, which is first the risk of hate and escalating into a bigger conflict. And because this is the Lebanese context, because this is the Lebanese society, and if you really want to move to a really democratic country, you should give this population a chance, and you should give this mindset a chance. And this starts with giving them the floor to have a conversation, not to simply believe that everything will lead to a conflict. And second of all, when you talk about criticism and hurting feelings, specifically in the context of elections, social media is exactly what is needed, because some politicians sign up to have their feelings hurt when they do a mistake. When you decide to be a public servant, it means that you decide to be applauded when you do good work, but also to be criticized, even in the harshest of ways, when you do something bad. And this is exactly what is needed in elections. And if really access to information was not the basis for transparency, and if transparency was not the basis for accountability, this organization, which is organizing this debate, wouldn't have its raison d'être. It wouldn't even be doing that. So this is how I'd like to resume, specifically when it comes to the fact that social media is a two-way street. Mainstream media is one-way street. You listen from your TV, for example, or from the radio. In social media, you fight back. You give your comment. You do your repost. You can even report. So it's a two-way street. It's kind of a synthesis between somebody who's receiving and giving their opinion too, which makes it richer and more accurate.
Thank you. So you exceeded time, but like 10 seconds, but it's okay. Okay, so we just finished the first debate. We will be grading both debates at the end. So now I propose we go to the second debate, the second topic, which is related to the money, to the aid that is being given to citizens. We want to know if it's considered clientelism or it's only the normal work of civil society organizations. Here again, we'll start with the affirmative team. So Angie and Christelle, you will be the ones starting.
Okay.
You ready?
Just sorry.
Angie, you want to go for it?
Just let me open the document. Sorry, my computer already عمل restart هلا, so I'm working on my phone. Okay.
You want to wait a little bit so your computer is fixed?
It's not gonna work anytime soon, so it's fine.
Okay.
But thank you. Christelle, if you want to start, I don't mind. All right. Start.
So should I start?
Yeah, you have 3 minutes.
First of all, I'd like to restate what the topic is about. It's about if social media really is, if civil society really responds to the needs of the people, or if it's just a way of clientelism. And I want to start first with the first half of this sentence, which is about responding to needs. Civil society does effectively respond to the needs of the people. especially in the light of the absence of a government which can do so, such as in Lebanon's case. So yes, civil society can respond to the needs of the people, both on the short and on the long term sometimes. On the short term, yes, they do help you have food, have the roof over your head, whatever are your basic needs. But also they are contributing into an institutional change also, and in legal frameworks. For example, we can talk about civil society's role, for example, Logi in the oil and gas sector. We can talk about, for example, the involvement of many civil society organizations when it comes to, for example, the public procurement law, or the public procurement law, currently the work on the independence of the judiciary, and so many other things. So yes, civil society can help on the short and on the long term. It can treat the symptoms, but it can also treat the disease. And an example that is very clear is the port explosion, because when the port explosion happened, it was people like us who were also on the street, and I don't think any of us are benefiting in any way from clientelistic measures. So in that sense, civil society is very nuanced, and we should be really focusing on that point. Thank you. How much time do I have left?
You still have 1 minute and 20 seconds.
All right, Angie, you want to add something?
Yeah, sure. You know, it's beneficial here to ask the second part of the question. When we're talking about clientelism, to remind the audience that the definition of clientelism is when you abuse or misuse entrusted funds. You should be in a position of power to be able to misuse and abuse those entrusted funds to mainstream them back into your own personal benefit. And we don't see how we can generalize that all CSOs to be involved in that regard. When we're talking about civil society, you know, we're talking about a situation where regardless of what your background is as a CSO, whether it's for clientelistic purposes or not, but the fact of the matter is that poverty is hitting 75% in Lebanon. There's an economic collapse that has not even reached its very lowest point, and that the foreign aid is non-existent at the moment, and that there's absolutely no state to fall back on. And so we ask, what exactly is the alternative here? Regardless of whether or not it's a clientelistic approach or not, there are people at stake. There are people who, if they do not get their immediate need at the very specific day that they need it, will die and are at the verge of hunger actually in Lebanon. And so at least when we wanna create something new, let's at least make sure that there's something to transition to. And this is the main point that we are trying to make.
Thank you, Angie and Christelle. Abed and Trina, time for the rebuttal.
Yes, so first of all, I want to give credit to the civil society organization in Lebanon because they're playing an important role in this unprecedented time. However, they mentioned a lot of DCSO responding to a lot of crises, especially the 4th of August. But these CSOs do not have accurate information about their functions, their members, and their influence. Where do they influence most? Or is there in a big region, the city, or the village? And as well, the largely unavailable information makes people trust these CSO even less, especially that these citizens are living in Lebanon, and trust is a very trust is little used in Lebanon. Also, I wanted to point out that they're saying that the CSOs are taking institutional roles, and we can't deny that they are also taking political roles. So here we can also see that these CSOs aren't actually funding themselves by themselves, meaning that their members aren't actually funding, or they can't fund themselves on this, especially if these CSOs are playing a big role. So one must ask whether these money are coming from people who are, again, in quotation form, neutral, or are they, you know, they have their own specific agenda and their specific thought in funding these CSOs in Lebanon, and especially that these CSOs come from various backgrounds, sectarian, religious. So are these funding that the CSOs are getting, and in order to help the poor and to reduce poverty in Lebanon, are they given equally, or are they actually in a form of clientelism to people that the donor or the foreign donor countries are giving them?
Okay, thank you. Now, Abed and Trina, we want to hear your arguments.
Is it okay if it's time?
Yeah.
Also, Lebanon is said to have one of the most diverse and active civil society in the region. Civil societies have recently become a major players in Lebanon's political scene. However, disparity in its conceptual approach causes confusion over its expectation and its role in the process for change. In Lebanon, there are two sources of funding. One of them is the Official Development Aid, or the ODA. It comes from industrialized countries where they provide aid for developing countries, which is according to the UN commitments. The problem in funding lies in the ability to bypass political consideration and conditional use of aid. In other words, just as the regime or the sulta depends on clientelism for aid, these foreign donor also depends on clientelism, but at a higher level. The donor countries would like that their money would go to people from the same background as their own. Also, money from expats, which is also for us a form of clientelism and a second source of funding, is also a form of clientelism, as I previously said, where the expat would actually fund specific civil organization for the sake of the people and region they are related to or affiliated to. The main problem is the absence of transparency in the funding and providing aid, just as the pillars of the clientelist system do. The lack of supervision also, either on the conduct or monetary side from the government and especially the Ministry of Social Affairs, is the reason why these CSOs would take advantage of the use and the distribute of these funds given to them. And these CSO might give them to people they know without even knowing or mentioning if these people are actually in need. And furthermore, as the Lebanese citizens and international donors are trusting more these CSOs, we can say that there's a lot of political parties who are actually disguised as CSO, who are using this situation in order to provide aid for the citizens of Lebanon for political favoritism and recently for electoral purposes as well. So again, submitting to the donors' agenda and to the experts, as well as the absence of transparency and supervision, are the reasons why civil society organizations in Lebanon are providing aid based on clientelism rather than supporting the citizens of Lebanon.
Thank you, Perina. Angie and Christelle, I want to hear your opinion on that.
Yes, I appreciate the concern of the opposing team for the integrity behind the aid that's being streamlined into Lebanon. But we do fear in our team that it's a generalization. You know, just as the international community is definitely, without a doubt, in certain places feeding into the clientelism when it's coming to funds, I think that's all the more reason to give more momentum to grassroots organizations who are working day and night. People like myself, people like you, people even since October 17 and after the August explosion that Christelle mentioned. I mean, we were the people on the ground. You know, it wasn't international communities who were making sure that people were getting their clientelistic share of the day. And when we're talking about also this concern about, you know, which money is streamlined to where and whether it's clientelistic or not, I think that it's also a very, very big good indicator when we see that the international community has absolutely profoundly lost any trust and hope in streamlining their funds through official public systems. And we know that a lot of the funds that were coming were through civil society organization. So here it's a question of, you know, which civil society organizations are you actually participating with? And it definitely could be the case, and it definitely is the case, that there is a lot of clientelism happening, which is all the more reason to give momentum to all of these civil society organizations who are doing their absolute best to try to get the very basic needs that the country isn't giving to its own people. Do we still have time?
Yeah, 30 seconds.
Okay. I don't think that in a humanitarian crisis, actually, we have the luxury to be talking about, you know, let's find exactly which fund is coming into exactly what pot. We're trying to actually see how many people try not to die. And this is the main question at the end of the day. And the lack of information which you cite is also a concern that we have, because if you want to start start to try to root out all of these bad apples that you have. How are you gonna stop everything that you're doing in the country just so you have this matter settled?
Sorry,
So
Angie, time's up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I want to hear more constructive arguments coming from your end, Angie and Christelle.
All right, Angie, you want to build on that, or you want me to take it from there?
Oh, take it from there.
All right, I'm going to take advantage of where Angie left off to start off with our next argument, which is mainly about these apples. The fact that, yeah, there are many bad apples here. There are a lot of people in power who also have like the means to help the people and who use it in order to create a clientelistic culture of allegiance, and especially in light of the elections. That's for sure. However, once again, we're talking here about the fact that there are good apples and bad apples in the barrel. And in a time when the population is dying of hunger, we can't just deny them the apples. We have to find a way to sort the apples out. That's the source of the problem here. It's not in just the presence of civil society organizations. Everywhere around the world, there are civil society organizations, and everywhere around the world, they are sometimes used for clientelistic measures. However, in the case of Lebanon, we have to use a more pragmatic approach. We cannot deny people access to basic help in a state that cannot provide it itself because it had never tackled social justice, for example, or a rights-based approach compared to a charity-based approach. When we are in such a state, it needs long-term reform to rebuild it and to rebuild institutions that actually use this rights-based approach instead, and to like lower the level of corporatism which exists in the country. However, in the meantime, we have a crisis going on. And this is why we should acknowledge at the basis the role that civil society plays, regardless of whether it's clientelistic or not, because in cases it is, and in cases it's not. It's a very nuanced situation, and it's not just black and white. Angie, you want to add to that?
I just want to reinstate what you talked about when it comes to the immediate concerns, and I want to link it back to the international donors. That civil society does have the trust of international donors, and we say that they put their money where their mouth is. These are people who have done their research and decided to opt for civil society organizations in light of the absence of this effective government, and I think this says a lot. And I think that, onwards in this debate, we should really avoid the generalizing and seeing problems to be more structural, like the fact that there's no legal framework which could really help in directing those funds or in deciding which funds goes where, and the absence of whistleblower protection programs and all of these assurances that no corruption is at play and that transparency is actually happening. And at the end of the day, we're really in the middle of rebuilding this accountability mechanism. I mean, it's not because something is falling means that there's nothing going up. Destruction is the most ample time to reconstruct. And I think that, in recent developments with anti-corruption, I think that we're doing a great job making sure that even though this is happening today, it doesn't mean it's going to happen forever. We are trying to avoid that to the best of our ability in the future with all of the measures that we're trying to take. This situation does not exist in isolation out of society. It exists in concert with all other efforts in society.
Thank you, Angie and Christelle. Abed and Perina, it's your right to refute.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to mention what Angie said about these CSOs covering covering poverty and the whole like Lebanon as a whole. But I wanted to ask a very important question: is that as yourself, would you see yourself, or would the people accept you if you go to a village or a region where you seem as a foreigner or someone that don't understand them? How would you provide these aids for them if they won't accept these aids from you because you are you? So the form is that many CSOs come to specific region or specific villages because they come from a similar background as those people. And also you were mentioning the international donors, but again, they have their own agenda. They have they have reasons, as you said, for funding these CSOs, and because these CSOs are becoming important, they're playing important role in various sectors, especially the political one, especially this year. how can you say that they know what they know? You said they know, so they know that if they fund this specific CSO, that they will they will also fund their own ideas, and that their ideas, the international donors' idea, would also be present further on in many institutions, or even to a bigger, in a bigger picture, to even the parliament. And also,
Yes.
we were mentioned.
Okay, I just wanted to add that no one gives money or aids for free. There's always a big question mark, which is why. And I'd like to highlight that the civil societies cannot replace and be an alternative for the government work. So they are organizations, they got their credits that they are working, they are aiding people, but they cannot replace the government and its work. Thank you.
Yes. And finally, we want to I want to speak about those apples that you were mentioning, both Crystal and Angie. As one apple gets bad, the other one would get affected at a certain point. So when one CSO gets recognized and gets more funding than the other, then this apple or this CSO would also want what this other CSO. The bad.
Pierina, you're lagging a little bit. You can repeat the last sentence you said.
Yes, I was mentioning that with the apples that are good and are bad, the good apple will eventually go on and become bad apple to actually make, or to actually to be recognized, and to actually get the funds and the recognition that they want to.
Okay, thank you. You can now add some more constructive argument, Abid and Pierina.
Okay, Pierina, you could start.
Yes, yes. Also, with we can say that the CSOs are becoming a form of they are following the foreign donors and they are giving their money or their funds or their aid to people or to specific people, because they need these supports. They need people to actually go behind them. They need people to actually be with them. They need to gain the trust, and maybe in Lebanon, this trust is only gained through monetary aids, through people actually going to you, through people actually telling you that this is what we will offer you, and we want this or specific offer from you too. So even though they are new to the political scene, they are new to, yet their objective can be seen clearly, that they want people to follow them. And especially in this crisis, the mean or the way that these citizens of Lebanon actually follow them is through clientelism, is through people actually knowing that these CSOs will have a motive, or would have a motive to actually come and help or aid those citizens, and in order to gain their trust as well.
I'd also like to add that all these new faces that are running the elections nowadays, they are mostly, some of them came from civil society's background. Thus, they use their background and their aid previously to prove to the people that we are here, we are working. But what's the return? Their return is the vote of the people. Thus, civil societies also promotes for clientelism in some situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Abid and Pierina. Angie and Christelle, it's time for the last rebuttal of today's debates.
All right, I'll start exactly from where Abid left off. Yes, you just stated that a lot of these people do come from a civil society background, and it can be interpreted in a way that, look at what I do, please, give me this compensation, which is your vote to get elected. However, and a lot of times we should not forget that it also can come from a very pure intention, which is that change is much more sustainable and real and palpable when it's protected by laws, which happens inside the parliament and nowhere else. So instead of having to constantly like do the work of your government through civil society organizations, you might very well want to influence the actual legislation, which wouldn't put this need in the first place. So we have to think of it that way too. Not everyone just wants to vote because they want a seat in parliament. And let's face it, it's not a luxury right now to be in the parliament and to have this responsibility on your shoulder. So in that sense, it helps us. It's a tool. It's a fast tool. It's a sustainable tool. Angie, you want to go from there?
Yes, a point was made that, you know, they have their own agendas. Of course, they have their own agendas. Nobody, we're not living in a world governed by Caritas or whatever, and obviously everyone has their own agendas. But my concern is that why are we taking an immediately conspiracy approach, which is even theoretically in politics is a very kind of like extremist approach. And if anything, it's a liberal world today where, you know, development, especially economic development, is a primary concern. And I think that, you know, the much aid that we've received and the many opportunities for aid that we didn't even tap into, like said, are kind of a show of, you know, there is aid. It's just about a matter of will to actually tap into it. And if anything, that's where the corruption should be a concern. I don't think that it's about clientelism. I think if you're that worried about corruption, then address the more bigger structural issues and not and don't break down anything that where the first and the biggest harm is going to be on the beneficiaries of whatever you're trying to do, because you don't care if you see them as collateral damage, because you're that keen on breaking down something which upon your perception is a conspiracy theory. And as for the bad apple, we're not
Angie, your time is up. You'll have time to continue in the conclusion. So we're going to give you 5 more minutes to prepare everything and be ready for the last conclusion. I'm going to assign you to your breakout rooms once again. How are you feeling?
It's fun. It's good. It's informative.
Yeah.
Feeling great.
Great, perfect. I'm really happy with the debate. Okay, so now it's the opportunity for Abed and Pirina to talk to us, to give us their last key points. You'll have 2.5 minutes. Just 1 second. Okay, tell me when you're ready.
Yes, we're ready.
Okay, can start.
Okay, again, I'd like to restate that we are living in a realistic society and realistic world whereby the system is based on give and take. There's nothing for free, away from imagination, and everyone is pure, or there's no one in this world is totally pure. There's always a black point in their record. However, those civil societies, they aid people for the sake of the people, but unlike for the sake of the people, to get in return their votes. But that's the key point that differentiate them from the Sulta. The Sulta, they aid people for themselves, for the Sulta's sake, not for the people, and to gain their votes. However, the civil societies aid the people for the sake of the people, but in return for their vote, which is a clientelistic approach. And I'd like to say also to add that there's no supervision, there's lack of transparency in many civil societies organization in Lebanon, and there's no real regulation and monitoring or a committee that monitors those organizations. And those organizations, their role is to fill the gap of the states and the government's government aids and responsibilities, not to not to be an alternative to the government and take its role. And finally, I'd like to conclude by saying I'll keep it to the audience to judge on this issue and on our approach, and to differentiate the good apples from the bad ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Abed and Pirina. Pirina, you want to add something?
No, we're fine.
All right, okay. So Angie and Christelle, it's your turn to conclude.
Thank you. Not to have a lot of attachment to the idea of apples, but it serves well here. You know, the bad apples, we're not in a playground here. We're in a place where there's always worms to ruin apples. And what our focus has to be is to remove the worms and not stop growing apples, because at the end of the day, people need to eat. And none of this is to come from a Machiavellian approach of the ends justify the means. It's simply about, it's not black or white situation. We are in a situation where there are some injustices being done, but this does not discredit the fact that there are people at need and that their needs are being met regardless, and that there is a way to reframe and restructure how all of this is happening if we're not happy with it. But does not mean that we take all of these beneficiaries down with us. So none of this really is to justify the continuity of corrupt CSOs. We don't have to destroy them, but we also don't have to support them. They're responding to the needs at the same time of even their clientelism, as you're saying. Like I said, it's not black or white. You don't destroy anything before an alternative is built. You can reinforce agreeable structures to create a reformative in a reformative transitory manner instead of taking a radical approach which will just have too much collateral damage. Christelle?
All right, I'm gonna build on this to finally conclude by saying one sentence. Let's call it by its name. In what sense? Abid, you talked about, if I'm correct, the fact, not just you, like in general, you were talking about the fact that, this can promote clientelism, allegiance, especially in light of the elections, which is our topic. And this is where I want to state that when we talk about CSOs, we're not talking and defending politicians who are directly paying for votes. This is bribery. Let's call it by its name. It's not CSOs. It's not clientele, it's bribery. And at the same time, when we talk about, and you even acknowledged it, Pirina and Abd, there's a lack of legal framework, there's a lack of institutional framework which would help us identify these civil societies and act accordingly. So here, let's call it what it is. It's a lack of implementation of laws like disclosure of conflict of interest, or even beneficiary ownership, all of these matters. So let's call it by its name. It's corruption due to a lack of a framework. This is the root of the issue. So once again, I go back to the same logic which was used with social media, and that is that we can't just throw away this double-edged sword just because we don't want to learn how to use it. This is how I'd like to conclude. So let's just call it by its name.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christelle, Angie, Abed, and Pirina. Before that, Professor Sensenig and myself move or relocate to the judging panel breakout room. I just want to say that the four of you were really perfect. You really gave a really good debate. To be honest, I wasn't expecting it to be that good. All right, so before announcing the winners and giving you the grades, there's just a small disclaimer. We do not support neither this or that. We just graded based on certain criteria, which were the organization and the clarity of the debate, the use of arguments, the use of cross-examination and rebuttal, and finally the presentation styles. So the winners for the first debate are Pirina and Angie and Christelle. You scored 12, and Pirina and Abed scored 10, and it's the same for the second debate. So congratulations. I will let Professor Sensenig give the explanation of the grading and some remarks.
Right. Okay. When I was asked by Transparency International to be one of the judges, I was very reluctant because I thought this was a little bit like Dancing with the Stars or America Has Talent or something, and I had to be mean or friendly or whatever. But I'll do my best to justify our joint decision. All in all, I think that that Pirina and Abed had really strong arguments. They were also very consistent in their argumentation, which meant that they chose a path and they followed through with it, and they didn't allow themselves to be pushed off their track. And I think that this was actually one of the reasons they scored high. I remember in both cases it was 10 to 12. It was very close in both cases. I think what as did Christelle and Angie. However, what sort of pushed Christelle and Angie over the top, which made them slightly better, was their ability to respond to the other side's arguments. This is where I saw that they listened to what the other side said and were able to think on their feet, so to speak, and were able to respond with new ideas that they perhaps hadn't had before. So it was very close, as you can see, but in the end, I think it was the agility in responding that made the affirmative side. Personally, I don't agree with you guys, but I had to honor you for your very, very good responses to the other side. I just wanted to point out one topic as far as content is concerned. I found a little bit too much emphasis on placing the blame on the international community, placing the blame outside of Lebanon, and not looking enough inside of Lebanon. And I think that was true for both sides, but perhaps a little bit more on the negative side than on the affirmative side. That was not the reason for my decision. I just wanted to point that out, that in the end, I think that most of the problems that we have here in Lebanon, and I'm using the word we intentionally, are homemade. So Alf Mabruk to both sides. It was very close. And I think that as I said before, the deciding thing was the ability to think on your feet and respond quickly to the other side's arguments. And well done. And I want to thank Pamela Schmeili, who was my student back in 2001. I hope she doesn't mind me telling that, because then you sort of get an idea about her age. She was a brilliant student, and she came back. This is the advantage of hanging around in Lebanon for all these years. And thank you, Dimitri, for contacting us. Thank you for the NDU team. Thank you for the participants. And I hope we can do this again. It's over to you, Dimitri.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for the coordination, all the support. And thank you for all the participants also, Angie, Christelle, Brina, and Abed. You were really perfect. I just want to take the opportunity to tell you to follow LTA on social media, so you can see how the work we're doing to track how CSO and aid providers can actually be held accountable in aid provision, and also follow us on all the activities and advocacy we're making together for a better Lebanon. Thank you very much, everyone. And see you.
Do we get an ending note? I just wanna tell Dr. Eugene that, you know, it's not necessarily a complete accurate reflection of our own beliefs, because I feel like this might reflect in our discussions in class. So yeah, I mean, you know my personal stances on both of these topics, but I just want to say thank you so much for Dr. Eugene